That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, we're going to go through. We are going to be looking at every single game this week, minus Thursday, because by the time this video comes out, that Thursday game will already be played. But we are going to be looking at every other game and talking about every wide receiver in that game, whether you should be starting them, whether you should be benching them. And we have a couple IR situations. We have a couple COVID situations. We have a couple bye weeks. So this is going to be an interesting video to say the least. But let me stall real quick so we can pull up our last YouTube video so we can pick away a couple comments to give away Fantasy Flock Network hats. Every single time you go down there, leave a comment, drop a like on the video, you get entered in to win a free Fantasy Flock Network hat. If you just want to go get one, you can always go join the Flock on Patreon, where we have our rest of season rankings updated every single week. You get a podcast breaking down your team in depth when you join. You get our Dynasty rankings. You get in Dynasty Leagues with us. You get a Fantasy Flock Network hat. You get in our group chat. There's so much over there on Patreon. Now, our first winner coming out from Jenna says, record is slowly improving, 5-3. Let's go. Happy to hear that, Jenna. And our other one coming out from Randall says, love the channel, Mason. You're the GOAT. Fantasy Flock is iconic. No, thank you, my friend. And of course, just shoot me that DM ASAP when y'all win that Fantasy Flock Network hat so I can get that out to you. And I apologize, not DM. Send me that email ASAP. And also, go join Underdog Fantasy over there on Underdog Fantasy when you make your first deposit with promo code FLOCK, and you go through the link in the description of the video. You actually get that match $1 for $1 by Underdog Fantasy up to $100, and they have a ton of intriguing player props over there. Thomas, can you please include those player props on the screen? That way people have a good idea of what we're actually looking at. They also have fantasy drafts you can get over there on Underdog Fantasy. There's a ton of stuff. Of course, they are the sponsor of the channel, and that should be it. Let's go through. Let's dive into some of these games. Let's start it off with the Las Vegas Raiders and the New York Giants. And we have had a million questions so far this week with Hunter Renfrow. Obviously, this is because Henry Ruggs no longer with Las Vegas. So all of a sudden, you're looking at this offense changing in a couple different ways. And I am never the person to come out and say, oh, a wide receiver leaves the offense, that hurts everyone. Jerry Jeudy leaving Denver, you can't get more excited for Courtland Sutton. No, Jerry Jeudy being out of this offense, of course, makes Courtland Sutton way better. Just knowing that target share is going to drive up for Courtland Sutton from being around 20% to maybe getting up to 26%, knowing that Jerry Jeudy is a player that's going to be seeing about 7 to 8 targets a game. And the lack of that in the offense, while yes, it may drive the overall offensive efficiency down, the offset in the volume that you're going to get bumped up for the other wide receivers there is going to outweigh that, and you're always going with volume over efficiency with predicting production down the road. Now, there are very few wide receivers in the entire NFL that I would say the opposite with. There are very few wide receivers in the entire NFL that I would say removing them from their offense is not going to improve the outlook for the other options. If anything, maybe it makes it a little bit worse, and Henry Ruggs will be one of those wide receivers. And the reason for this is if you're looking at Henry Ruggs this season, well, yes, for Las Vegas and technically fantasy points per game, he's up there at the number 1 spot out of all these wide receivers. But at the same time, Henry Ruggs is not a prototypical wide receiver 1 for his offense. This is someone that through 7 weeks had 36 targets in his offense. So Ruggs is essentially averaging about 5 targets a game in Las Vegas. And what is that telling us? That's telling us, oh, okay, well, you move Ruggs from this offense, there aren't that many extra targets to go around. And we also have to ask ourselves, how is Henry Ruggs being used in Las Vegas? He's not being used as that prototypical X-alpha wide receiver on the outside. He's not being used in the slot. No, he's being used as the vertical field stretching option. Why do you think the Las Vegas Raiders decided to draft Henry Ruggs over Jerry Jeudy, over CeeDee Lamb in the 2020 draft class? You can come out here and you can easily make the argument, Mason, that's a horrendous pick. They made a massive mistake in doing so. And I will say, of course, you were never ranking Henry Ruggs over those other wide receivers from a fantasy football context, because you know the role that CeeDee Lamb's playing in Dallas is he's going to be the guy picking up first downs. He's going to be the guy moving the ball down the field. He's going to be the player getting 8-9 targets a game, and he'll be way more productive for fantasy purposes. When Las Vegas drafted Henry Ruggs, they know from a yardage standpoint, from a reception standpoint, Henry Ruggs was never even going to be a top 5 receiver in that 2020 class. The reason that those teams go out of their way and they invest into speed that highly, that aggressively, why you see Tutu Atwell, why you see Dwayne Eskridge going in the second round of the 2021 draft class, is because they provide efficiency to the overall offense. They make lives easier on Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, Bryan Edwards. Because with Henry Ruggs, he was just taking the top off the defense, where two safeties were having to stay back at all times, where they couldn't bring one down, stack the box against Josh Jacobs in this running game. They couldn't bring one down to make sure that Hunter Renfrow wasn't going to be able to get that crossing route over the middle and pick up the first down, because they had to be worried about Henry Ruggs getting behind them. So Henry Ruggs being removed for this offense, if anything, I think it definitely does not help Hunter Renfrow, even though I know a lot of people want to make that argument. And from a simple standpoint, if you don't look into the situation, yes, removing the top option from that offense, of course, will help the secondary wide receivers there. But Henry Ruggs, Hunter Renfrow, if you look at their average depth of target, if you look at where they run routes on the football field, they essentially play two completely different positions. Losing Henry Ruggs does not make me more excited about any other wide receiver in this offense. Maybe you make the argument for Bryan Edwards. Nonetheless, I think you can play Hunter Renfrow against the Giants. He will have a high floor only in a PPR format. You're playing in a non-PPR league. You're not going to be playing Renfrow. Bryan Edwards, we're not playing either. Jam in Darren Waller. Darren Waller looks like he'll be healthy. But I think that we honestly have to be lowering our expectations for this entire Las Vegas Raiders offense. And going over to the New York Giants side of the ball, I mean, right now it looks like Kenny Galladay's practicing, Kadarius Toney's practicing, Sterling Shepard is going to be out. Not a great matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders by any means, but I would assume that if Shepard is out, that makes you have to go through and play Kadarius Toney, even though I was telling people to play Toney last week, and definitely he disappointed against Kansas City, but he was in and out of that game with injuries. I mean, if he plays every snap here against the Las Vegas Raiders, even though it's not a great matchup, maybe just given the fact that he can get a bump up with his usage in the slot when those Sterling Shepard, that could help out Kadarius Toney. So yeah, I think you have to play Toney if we do not have Shepard in this game. And Galladay, I'd probably want to wait a week and kind of see what we're going to get from his return. Now, going over to our next team, speaking of one of my massive mistakes last week, as soon as Calvin Ridley was ruled out, I told people to play Russell Gage. Obviously, that was horrible. Russell Gage led this team in routes run a week ago, but still wasn't able to draw a single target. You cannot trust any wide receiver in Atlanta. I mean, the only pass catcher that you are going to be playing will be Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, we had to move him up in our rankings after the Calvin Ridley injury, whatever you want to call it, stepping away from football. I mean, here with Kyle Pitts, this is now a tight end that is so safe to project for 8+ targets every single week guaranteed. At the tight end position, that is almost impossible to come by. Have to drastically move Kyle Pitts up our rankings, even though he disappointed a week ago. And in the case of New Orleans Saints, I mean, if you have Taysom Hill starting, you cannot play a single wide receiver for New Orleans, knowing that Taysom Hill will be soaking up so much of that value in this offense by himself with what he has as a rusher and also his usage in the red zone. Now, going over to our next game, the Buffalo Bills and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Buffalo, I mean, I think that this is a very comparable situation to what you actually have in Arizona, where we know this is one of the best passing offenses in the entire NFL. You know that they have a couple different secondary wide receivers that any given week, they have the ceiling to show that top end level performance. We see this with Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley essentially alternating every other week. It goes, you get 20 points, you get 0 points. Now you get 20 points, you get 0 points. I would say against the Jacksonville Jaguars, this is probably not a matchup you want to be playing those secondary options, just knowing that this game currently has a spread of 14 points. The Buffalo Bills should be able to lean on the run a little bit more later on in the contest. Of course, you're plugging and playing Stephon Diggs, no question. In the case of the Jacksonville Jaguars, I mean, with Marvin Jones, this is a wide receiver that started off the year extremely hot. And when you had DJ Chark, I mean, being removed from this offense, I actually thought that was going to be helping Marvin Jones, knowing that DJ Chark, unlike Henry Ruggs, was getting up there to 7-8 targets a game. Yet, I mean, here with Marvin Jones, he has been disappointing over the past few weeks. I mean, he's had one game with over 50 receiving yards in the past month. Of course, you do not like to see that. That one game was against Miami, where he had 7 receptions, 100 receiving yards, 10 targets. This past week, he had 8 targets against the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the issue is just Buffalo. This is a very, very tough matchup. You could make the argument that Buffalo has the best defense in the league currently. I'm honestly probably going to be benching every single pass catcher for the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you are desperate for a tight end and we just need anybody to play at the position, if you have Gronk on a bye this week, then I think you could go through and look to play Dan Arnold. I believe he's had like 23 targets over the past 3 weeks. That would be a completely fine player to go to. Now, our next game will be the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals. Looks like Odell Beckham Jr., his days are over in Cleveland. I mean, at the time of this recording, he's been excused from his second straight practice. Obviously, you have his dad posting some pretty funny videos on Instagram, but that's not going to make me too excited about Jarvis Landry. I know Jarvis Landry has been getting the volume in Cleveland. You know, I'm always the person to say chase that volume. But at the end of the day, I mean, this overall passing offense is just not going to be in the upper end of the NFL. I mean, you're going to have Baker Mayfield and this entire Cleveland Browns offense trying to be a bottom 5 team with passing rate over expectation. And yes, you get 10 targets a week ago for Jarvis Landry, but this is a wide receiver that we know, historically speaking, over the past 3 seasons, pretty much that his entire NFL career, if we're going to be honest, even dating back to Miami. I mean, this has been someone that his historical rates for his yards per target and his touchdown rate are going to be drastically lower than the majority of other wide receivers. And if he's going to be playing in a low passing volume offense to begin with, really don't love the idea of playing Jarvis Landry. I know the Cincinnati Bengals defense just gave up 400 plus yards for Mike White, but still I want to stand by the fact that this Bengals defense isn't as bad as what you've had in years past. So I hate to say it, we're not starting a single wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns. In Cincinnati, I'm going to go through. We're going to continue to play Jamar Chase, T. Higgins as top 24 wide receivers each and every week. Obviously, I don't need to convince you to play Jamar Chase. In the case of T. Higgins, maybe it takes some convincing. Y'all know this was our number 1 buy low wide receiver a week ago. And if we're looking at T. Higgins right now, I know this past week, the fantasy production wasn't through the roof with T. Higgins. I mean, you only get 14 fantasy points, but he was this damn close to finally getting there with the touchdown. This is a 6'4" wide receiver who his touchdown rate his rookie season in 2020 in games that Joe Burrow played in was through the roof. You're looking at the past 4 weeks since returning from that shoulder injury, and he's actually had more targets than Jamar Chase. So yeah, we're going to go through. We're going to continue to jam in T. Higgins every chance that we get. This matchup against the Browns isn't a great one, but honestly, I mean, if this game's going to be more competitive than people think, I think you can play T. Higgins. Now, our next game is going to be the New England Patriots against the Carolina Panthers. Right now, we don't know if Christian McCaffrey is going to be good to go, but still, I mean, in Carolina, it's very simple. You don't love playing DJ Moore, but you're going to end up playing DJ Moore anyway. Yes, historically speaking, we have seen Bill Belichick go and shut down the opponent's number 1 receiving threat and kind of make them work with their secondary options. It doesn't matter that Robbie Anderson is having a large role in this offense, because Robbie Anderson has been the worst wide receiver in the NFL so far this season from any efficiency metric that you want to look at. So you cannot play Robbie Anderson. In the case of New England, this target share has been so diluted among every single pass catcher that Jacoby Myers was a plug and play guy at the beginning of the season when he was getting 10 plus targets a game. That has drastically dipped down over the 5 weeks or so. So I think now it's probably about time to just say, New England, we're not that excited about playing anybody either. I hate going through and talking about these gross situations. If you had to play someone for the New England Patriots, it would be Jacoby Myers. Now, going over to our next game, the Denver Broncos are going to be playing at Dallas against the Cowboys. You're playing both Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Now, y'all know we said not to play either wide receiver last week, with Jeudy coming back from the high ankle sprain, presumably taking over as the wide receiver 1 in Denver, but we weren't willing to just 100% go all in on Jeudy. 1 week after that injury, we were going to prefer to see if we could get him back in 1 week, kind of see how the volume's going to work out and see how many snaps he's going to be playing. Well, Jerry Jeudy did leave this team in receptions a week ago. And a big thing is Noah Fant is going to be out this week due to COVID. Noah Fant's absence will be opening up more targets to go in the direction of both Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. I know Albert O definitely gets a big jump up, but Albert O is not going to be able to take all that volume that Noah Fant leaves in this offense. It's not a great matchup against a much improved Dallas Cowboys secondary, but I think we are going to be going through playing both Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy as top 24 wide receivers. They are neck and neck in our rankings this week. I think you can really go with either player that you want. And then here in Dallas, really hoping that we get Michael Gallup back. I mean, in terms of making our start-sit decisions, it doesn't make that many impacts knowing that you're playing CeeDee Lamb, you're playing Amari Cooper regardless. Obviously, these are 2 stud-level players. I'm not going to be willing to play Michael Gallup his first week back due to injury. I mean, just like what we said with Jerry Jeudy, I would prefer to wait a week, kind of see the role that we have with Gallup. In the long term, I think Amari Cooper may be an intriguing sell high candidate based on the fact that Gallup will be able to take significantly more targets in this offense than Cedric Wilson has so far this season. But for this week in particular, you're not going to be starting Michael Gallup. Now, going over to our next game, we got the Minnesota Vikings and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I will say that right now we have some uncertainty with this matchup because we do not know if Sammy Watkins is going to be playing in this game. Let me pull up the most recent report on Watkins. So he did not practice yesterday. I'm recording this on the 4th, so he did not practice on Wednesday. I think practice reports on Thursday and Friday are going to be very telling with Sammy Watkins. If Watkins does play, I think it's going to be very hard to go through and ever look at considering playing Rashad Bateman, knowing that this will be the most target competition that you've ever really had in Baltimore, with the combination of Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, and Sammy Watkins. I think we're playing Hollywood Brown regardless, but he has been a top 10 wide receiver so far this season on a points per game basis. Your expectations will have to be lowered. I mean, this matchup in particular against the Vikings, this Vikings defense has had a much worse season than what they have had over the past 5 years or so. This Vikings defense really is not the same unit that it was 3 years ago. And if we're going to be looking at Minnesota, I know Justin Jefferson coming off this soft week against the Dallas Cowboys, but Jefferson was in and out of that game with a lower body injury. You're playing Justin Jefferson regardless. Same thing with Adam Thielen here. I mean, with Adam Thielen, we told you to sell him high at the beginning of the season. Then he had a couple of weeks of down production. Told you all to buy him low. Now we're right back on the Adam Thielen train. It's just essentially, does he get the touchdown? He has the red zone role. We know that if Adam Thielen scores that touchdown, you're jumping up and down. You're extremely excited. The weeks that he doesn't, just based on the fact that, the receptions, the receiving yards aren't going to be through the roof. You're kind of going to be hating your life. We have said this all season now with Adam Thielen. It's really easy to see when Adam Thielen scores 4 touchdowns through 2 weeks. All of a sudden, he's a sell high player. When he goes 2 to 3 weeks without scoring a touchdown, everybody panics. He's a buy low. We just know that those touchdowns are going to be volatile on a week-to-week basis. It's going to all even itself out at the end of the season, though. Now, going over to our next matchup, we have the Houston Texans against the Miami Dolphins, and fire the hell up Brandon Cooks. Tyrod Taylor will be playing in this game. This will be the best matchup that we have had for Brandon Cooks so far this season against the Miami Dolphins. Let me look up the spread of this game, just because last I checked, that spread was put out when we did not have the certainty on Tyrod Taylor. But right now, Miami's actually 5.5 point favorites against the Houston Texans. The majority of these Houston games that you pull up, the spread going into the week will be 14, 15, 16 points. So this will definitely be one of the closer games that Houston's played all year. I think you definitely have to play Brandon Cooks. And in the case of Miami, I'm fine with you playing both Jalen Waddle and Devontae Parker as flex options if you have one of those Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receivers on their bye week. Like we said with Jalen Waddle, he was a sell high wide receiver for us going into this past week based on the role that Devontae Parker would be playing. But knowing that we will not have Will Fuller in this contest, knowing that it's a great matchup against the Houston Texans, Waddle did get double-digit targets a week ago. I think you could consider playing both Jalen Waddle and Devontae Parker. Now, our next game, the Los Angeles Chargers and the Philadelphia Eagles. Mike Williams coming off a very disappointing performance. You play Mike Williams regardless. This past week, it was a tough matchup against the New England Patriots. The week before that, when he disappointed, he actually only played about 30% of the snaps. He did not practice a single day going into that game. Clearly he was not healthy. He should be healthy going up against the Eagles. Despite the Eagles shutting down the Detroit Lions this past week, they still don't have that strong of a defense overall. You're playing Keenan Allen, playing Mike Williams, very boring. And with Devonta Smith, I'm going to have to say it. We have been way too high on him over the past few weeks now. I'll say this past week, I don't even want to take that L because, you only had 14 passing attempts from Jalen Hurts overall. But I don't think you can play Devonta Smith. It's not a great matchup knowing that this Los Angeles Chargers defense, you kind of attack them by running the ball. I will say you definitely play Dallas Goedert. With Dallas Goedert, he saw 7 targets out of 14 pass attempts last week for a 50% team target share. The week before that, he broke his career record in his snap rate for that offense with no Zach Ertz. Clearly, Dallas Goedert's that elite level tight end going forward. You play Goddard every single week. Now, our next game, the Green Bay Packers against the Kansas City Chiefs. Oh my God, do we need to say anything here? Yes, we have no Aaron Rodgers, but you're playing Davante Adams regardless. Adams is going to be a player getting up to 30% of the team's targets in his offense. That level of security and his red zone role is going to make Davante Adams a play every single week, regardless of who you have at quarterback. Now, in the case of the Kansas City Chiefs, yes, they've been very disappointing so far this year compared to what you have had over the past 3 with Mahomes. But still, at the end of the day, Tyreek Hill is a top 3 wide receiver on a points per game basis so far this season. And I think we have seen the worst from this Kansas City Chiefs offense overall. You play Tyreek Hill, you play Travis Kelce, you don't really think about it. You're playing the studs in this contest. All those secondary wide receivers in Kansas City really are not appealing at all anymore. Now, our next matchup will be the Arizona Cardinals and the San Francisco 49ers. Now, with Arizona, AJ Green on the COVID list. Looks like AJ Green is not going to be playing this week. But at the same time, we do not have certainty with either DeAndre Hopkins or Kyler Murray. So it's really up in the air of what we are going to be doing with Arizona. I will say that if Kyler Murray does not play, I don't even know if I can tell you to play Hopkins at this point because we don't know the actual health that you have with Hopkins from that hamstring injury. Neither of them practiced on Thursday, but given the veteran status that they have, neither of those players need to be practicing on Thursdays. Their practice participation on Friday, which is going to be the time this video comes out today. We live stream every single night. I have not missed a day of live streaming in over 100 days in a row, answering questions for 3 to 4 hours. So I'll definitely be giving y'all constant updates with this Arizona Cardinals game all the way to kickoff. Just make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that bell next to the subscribe button. But in the case of Kyler Murray, if he is removed from this offense, I think you have to definitely say, okay, well, we can't play Christian Kirk. We can't play Rondale Moore. We can't play anybody outside of DeAndre Hopkins. And that would be assuming Hopkins is good to go. Now, with the absence of AJ Green, it's really tough to say exactly how this is going to affect the offense because maybe you get Christian Kirk playing a little bit more on the outside to take over that AJ Green role. Maybe we get Rondale Moore sliding up to get a higher snap rate overall and playing in the slot. Which, if that was the case, I think they would each individually have upside, but the issue is trying to predict which one of those players is actually going to pop off, very similar to what we have in that offense with Buffalo. We know that there will be production in Arizona, but good luck trying to figure out who that will be. I would say if we were going to have to try to just pin down one player out of the combination of Christian Kirk and Rondale Moore that we would start, it most likely would be Christian Kirk, but you wouldn't be that excited about it. Now, our next game, the Tennessee Titans and the Los Angeles Rams. Okay, so with Tennessee, AJ Brown, y'all know this was someone that we are screaming to buy low earlier this season. I know so many people in the flock have AJ Brown, and they were able to get him at a great price at the beginning part of this year. Now, in the case of Julio Jones, this is kind of the question that we have. He actually started practicing again yesterday. This is a game where you would naturally assume that Tennessee does have to look to throw the ball because they are currently 8-point underdogs without Derrick Henry in this contest. Going to be very interested to see exactly how this offense operates, and that, yes, you would expect the passing volume to go up when no Derrick Henry, but if the efficiency based on that play action pass is going to be drastically lowered, it's going to be really hard to kind of go through and balance that out and say, what does the dip in efficiency versus the rise in volume actually mean? 9 times out of 10, I would say, hell yes, let's go and let's play Julio Jones, let's play AJ Brown. But the issue is, I think that Derrick Henry in this offense is just an extreme outlier that we really can't look at any other situation and try to draw a comparison to it. So I think if anything, we kind of just have to sit it out. And playing AJ Brown, even though it's a very tough matchup, I think given the fact that it is a tough matchup, we probably sit Julio Jones just to have some clarity on this Tennessee Titans offense going forward. In the case of the Los Angeles Rams, you play Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 1 overall. Don't need me to say anything on that. Now, with Robert Woods, this is a wide receiver that had 20 fantasy points a week ago, only 35 receiving yards. However, he got that essentially with 1 rushing touchdown, 1 receiving touchdown that he had this past week. As very unpredictable going forward. I'll say that it's a nice matchup against Tennessee, however. So I think you could play Robert Woods in your flex, even though I wouldn't be that excited about it. Right now we have Robert Woods ranked as our wide receiver 20 this week. So you're probably going to go through and play him, but you're not going to be excited to do so. Now, our last game on Monday night, god dang, why do we have to look at this Monday night game? I wish this Monday night game, instead of being the Chicago Bears and the Pittsburgh Steelers, if we could get really any other game on Monday night, if we could get the Browns and Cincinnati, that would be great. If we could get the Vikings and the Ravens, if we could get honestly, that's it. We got some pretty bad games this week, but nonetheless, with Chicago, you're not going to be playing a single wide receiver. If you were going to go for someone, it would be Darnell Mooney. I got that horribly wrong coming into the season, saying that Allen Robinson was a guaranteed, 25% team target share level player, that he was a can't miss player in the 3rd round, that he was 100% going to be the alpha wide receiver in this offense. Yet Darnell Mooney, the wide receiver 1 with Justin Fields over Allen Robinson, can't play either though, with the passing volume being so poor in Chicago. And Pittsburgh, you're playing Deontay Johnson as a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1, even in a tough matchup against the Chicago Bears. He is a guaranteed to see double-digit targets every single week that Juju Smith-Schuster is not in this offense. Chase Claypool is going to be a little bit more of a volatile option. I do have Chase Claypool ranked as a top 24 wide receiver, however, just given the fact that he is seeing career high levels in snap rate with no Juju Smith-Schuster, and at the same time, while he may not necessarily be able to get hit on that deep ball by Ben Roethlisberger, we know his yard after catch ability will give him that spike week. Potentially he had 130 receiving yards just a few weeks back. And yeah, that's all I got for you. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please go down there. Make sure you drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, just leave a comment with any question you may have. I'm going to be trying to get to as many of those comments as I can. We'll be live streaming every single night. So make sure you subscribe, come out, ask your questions then. And also go use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. When you sign up for Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK, they match you dollar for dollar all the way up to $100 for that first deposit. And you can check out a ton of intriguing player props there. You can get into some drafts there as well. You can find that link in the description of the video, as well as the link to join Patreon to get your Flock Network ad, get a podcast breaking down your fantasy team. You know it all. I thought we try to go through this as fast as I can, but nonetheless, thank you so much for supporting the channel, and I hope I see you all at the live stream tonight.